The rain fell steadily over Seattle that evening, painting the streets in a dull silver glow. Drops clung to car roofs, slid down fogged windows, and pooled near the curbs where headlights turned them into small, trembling mirrors. It wasn't a storm, just the kind of soft, persistent rain that seeps into everything. Inside a small cafe on the corner, beneath a faded sign that read Lavender, the light flickered weakly. The smell of coffee, fried onions, and exhaustion filled the air. Chairs scraped against the tiled floor. The old espresso machine hissed, and through it all moved Emma, a young waitress in her mid-20s with chestnut hair tied back loosely and eyes that carried sleepless nights. This was her third shift in a row. The cook had called in sick, the hostess had quit, and the customers, well, they just kept coming. Her hands trembled slightly every time she carried a tray, and her legs ached as though each step was a test. But she pushed through, because outside the cafe, life wasn't waiting to be kind. Debts were piling up, her mother's medical bills were growing, and quitting was not an option. The rain drummed softly on the glass as Emma wiped down a table, pretending not to notice the group of 3 men who had been sitting in the corner for nearly an hour. They were loud, half-drunk, their laughter cutting through the low jazz playing from the speakers. They flirted shamelessly, commented on her looks, and the way their eyes lingered made her stomach tighten. Still, she smiled, that same polite, tired smile waitresses wear when they've run out of choices. When she brought them their soup, her hand shook slightly. A few drops splashed on one man's shoe. It was nothing, a mistake anyone could make. But he jumped up, furious. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. Before she could apologize, he shoved her arm away and the plate fell, smashing against the floor. The cafe went silent. The sound of the crash seemed to freeze everything. Emma dropped to her knees instinctively, gathering the pieces, her face burning red with shame. Someone in the group started laughing and pulled out a phone, recording her as she whispered, "I'm sorry." No one else moved, not the customers at the counter, not the man reading his paper, not the young couple pretending not to see it. And then, a voice. Calm, low, steady. "Apologize." It came from the far end of the room, where a man in a dark coat had been sitting quietly. He stood now, tall but not intimidating, his presence oddly grounding. The group turned to him, confused. "Excuse me," one of them sneered. The man didn't raise his voice. "You heard me. Apologize to her." There was something in the way he said it. Not loud, not angry, but firm enough to silence the entire room. For a moment, no one breathed. The rude man looked at him, then at Emma, and muttered something under his breath. But under that gaze, he gave in. "I'm sorry," he said flatly, and sat down. The stranger didn't say another word. He just helped Emma pick up the last of the broken pieces, placed them on her tray, and gave her a small nod before returning to his table. Emma wanted to thank him, but her voice didn't come up. She just stared, trembling, not from fear, but from the strange warmth of being defended. When the cafe finally emptied hours later, she found him still there. He was helping her sweep the floor as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "No need. You handled it well." They didn't talk much, just worked side by side. When he was about to leave, he looked at her for a moment longer and said softly, "There's strength in you, Emma. More than you think. One day, it'll change your life." Then he was gone. The door closed behind him, and only the sound of the rain remained. The next morning, when Emma put on her worn-out coat to go back to work, she felt something in her pocket. A small folded note, her name written in clean handwriting. Inside, an address, and 2 words, "You deserve more."
"I'm glad you came." He introduced himself as Daniel Morgan, owner of a growing chain of cafes, including Lavender. He told her he'd been visiting that night, quietly observing how his staff handled stress. He'd seen rudeness, neglect, indifference, and then he'd seen her. her patience, her kindness, her ability to keep going even when no one seemed to care. "I need people like you," he said simply. "Not just workers, people who understand people. That cafe, I want you to manage it." Emma thought he was joking. She laughed nervously, said she had no qualifications, no experience, but he handed her a key and a card. "Everyone starts somewhere," he said. "You've already started with something most people forget: empathy." At night, Emma sat by her window, watching the rain fall again. It looked the same, but something in her had changed. She thought about her mother, who always told her that kindness never goes unnoticed. Maybe this was proof. Over the next few weeks, Emma stepped into her new role with trembling hands and a racing heart. The cafe was the same walls, same tables, but it felt different when she walked in as manager. The staff respected her quietly, perhaps sensing the story behind her calm. She didn't demand, she guided. She didn't shout, she listened. Every morning she arrived early, made herself a cup of coffee, and opened the windows before the rain started. She remembered every corner where she had once stood exhausted, every shift she had wanted to quit. Now she greeted each new waitress with the same words Daniel had said to her: "There's strength in you. One day it'll change your life." Her mother's health began to improve slowly, not miraculously, but steadily. Emma paid off small debts one by one. Her days were still long, her nights still quiet, but her heart was lighter. Sometimes, Daniel would visit unannounced, ordering nothing but tea and watching from his corner. They didn't talk much, but when they did, the conversation was real, about effort, trust, and the kind of dignity that comes from surviving without bitterness. Months passed, the cafe began to bloom again. Customers noticed the change, how the atmosphere felt warmer, more human. Word spread. And one rainy afternoon, a group of young waitresses huddled near the counter, whispering about how kind their new manager was. Emma overheard them and smiled to herself. If only they knew how it began, with spilled soup and broken dishes. But that's the thing about life. You never know which small moment is quietly changing everything. Sometimes it's a single word. Sometimes it's someone standing up when everyone else stays silent. And sometimes it's a stranger who sees in you what you've forgotten to see in yourself. On the anniversary of her promotion, Emma closed the cafe early. She walked outside, umbrella in hand, to the same street where it had all started. Seattle was still raining. It always would be. But this time, the rain didn't feel cold. It felt alive, almost comforting. As she crossed the street, she saw a small child drop a coin near a puddle and burst into tears. Without thinking, Emma bent down, picked it up, wiped it clean, and gave it back with a smile. The mother thanked her and she waved it off. "It's nothing," she said. But as she walked away, she realized it wasn't nothing, because years ago, someone had done the same for her. Back at the cafe, she pinned a small note to the staff board. It read, "You deserve more." She didn't sign it. She didn't need to. Anyone who read it would understand. And as the rain whispered outside and the neon sign of lavender glowed through the mist, Emma knew goodness still existed. Not loud, not perfect, not dramatic, just quiet and real. The kind that holds you up when life tries to push you down. That night, she turned off the lights, locked the door, and stepped into the rain. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel tired. She felt alive. So if you're listening to this story, maybe somewhere far away, remember this. You never know who's watching your small acts of courage. You never know what doors your quiet persistence might open. And you never know how far one moment of kindness can carry you. The rain kept falling over Seattle that night, turning the city lights into rivers of gold. And somewhere under the glow of a sign that read lavender, a young woman smiled. Not because life was easy now, but because she finally believed she could face whatever came next. Dear friends, tell us in the comments, where are you listening from? And if Emma's story touched your heart, share it. Because sometimes the world needs reminders like this, that no act of kindness is ever wasted.